Hi everyone, Christina Werner here. Welcome to another video for SimonsStamp.com. Today I'm going to be using a stamp set and also the paints that are included in the November 2019 card kit. This is a really fun kit with tons of possibilities, including watercolor cards from Susie Plantamura. But today I'm going to be doing just some watercoloring with the watercolor set that comes in the kit and the stamp set. The stamp set is called Woodland Whimsy, and there's tons of fun critters and little floral elements that you can use to build a scene using the stamps. I'm going to be using a few of the different images, and let's get started. Starting out with some Strathmore cold press watercolor paper, and I'm placing it in my MISTI stamping tool. I'm using a MISTI today in particular because this is watercolor paper, and it might take a few stampings to get a really crisp impression. So I'm going to start out with this cute little hedgehog down here, and I'm going to place him kind of right in the center. I am going to be trimming this down to a A2 size card, so I will have the opportunity to get him completely centered later if he's not centered enough right now. I'm not too concerned about the positioning at this moment. I'm stamping in Versafine Clair ink and the color Acorn. I'm using this brown because I wanted a little bit of a softer look as opposed to using a very stark black color. And this Versafine Clair ink is a pigment ink and it's waterproof, so it's going to be perfect for my watercoloring today. Got a really good impression. I don't need to stamp it twice. However, I am going to need to mask the little hedgehog's arms. I want to have him holding a heart, one of the little hearts in the stamp set. So I'm going to stamp on some Gina designed masking magic paper. This is included in the card kit, and I just want to get a little bit, well, I'm going to cover him completely, and use the residual ink on the stamp to stamp my mask. And there's just enough ink left to stamp him really faintly on the masking paper. I'm going to trim this out really roughly and then hold it with some tweezers and hit it with the heat tool, just because this masking paper is a little bit slick and the brown ink I used is a pigment ink, so it will take a little bit longer to dry. And I don't want to smudge my fingers while I'm trimming these out. I'm going to peel off that release paper, and then I can place the mask directly over those arms. Get everything lined up just perfectly. Now I'm taking the heart in the stamp set, and I'm going to stamp the heart right over his little arms. All right, so now we have the little heart in his arms. And I'm going to save this mask just on the back of the stamp set. I'll just put it right over the little hedgehog. I can save that mask for use on another card. Now I'm going to do some very careful stamping with the curved banner at the bottom, as well as some of the leaves and floral images in the stamp set. Okay, so there is all of my stamping, this little group of leaves and stems, the banner, the hedgehog, it's holding a heart. I think it's super cute. So now I'm going to watercolor all of these images. All right, I'm going to be using a size 2 round brush. This is from Oil and Langnickel. And I'm going to start by painting the little hedgehog. I'm going to do kind of like a creamy mustard color in the center, and I'm going to do some color testing just on some scratch watercolor paper here to see if I have the color that I want. This isn't quite the color I want, so I'm going to mix it until I get the color I want. And I'm just going to use there's some clear area on the palette, so I'll mix it over on this side. I'm going to add this kind of gray shade up here. I'm hoping that'll give me that's closer to the color I want. So I'm going to add gray over on the side, and then I'll be able to use this shade on the little hedgehog. All right, I'm going to have a little bit of a shadow underneath his arms and fade that out just a little bit. And I'm also going to have this color be up around his nose and mouth, and then come in from the edges. My brush is a little bit dry, but with the color, so I'm using that to kind of flick in from the edges to give him that texture. All right, I'm going to take this red shade up here, and I want to dilute it quite a bit so it's a very much more pale pink. So I'm just adding a lot of water to that, and then I'm going to give this little guy a little blushy area over on the side. And I'm also going to use that color in his ears, and then a little bit down on his feet. I'm going to soften that edge on the cheeks, just with a little bit of water. All right, and now I'm going to bring in the much darker brown. And I want it quite dry so that I can do that same flicking technique where I was able to use the brush very dry and get that texture. In fact, I want it much darker, so I'm going to add some of this black. And now I just want to make sure I paint his ears so that they have a little bit of color. All right, and with that lighter shade, I just want to add a little bit of color on his arms. And I'm going to add that shadow under the heart again, just to intensify it a little bit, since it did sort of get lost in translation after I started painting the rest of the scene here. All right, with a semi-dry brush, I'm just going to flick from the center once again, just to get that texture. All right, and then I think that little guy is done. I'm just going to paint the other areas. I'm going to have the heart right in the center be a nice red shade. And this is actually a really, really pretty color in the watercolor palette. All right, I want to do more fall colors for these other leaves. I'm going to kind of mix a nice orange and yellow shade for the larger leaves. So I can sort of bring in this orange shade, but then bring in sort of a golden yellow. Kind of get those mixing a little bit. I'll do red berries over on the side. And then the rest I'm going to do shades of green. Now there are only really, really bright greens in this watercolor palette, so I might have to experiment a little bit and mix some other greens. I think I'll do these leaves in brown. And in fact, I'm going to mix sort of a brownish green shade. I'm going to go over this one again just to mute that green color just a little bit. And then I'm going to do that kind of muted green brown shade up here at the top. All right, the only color I have left to work with is down here. This pink up here is looking a little bit too pink for me, and I want it to be a little bit more of a maroonish red color. Now that I'm looking at it, I want it to kind of fit in with the fall colors. So I'm taking the very, very last color in the bottom of the palette right here, and I'm going to paint over top. Doesn't look like that's going to intensify it much, so maybe I'll just go over it with brown. This might work. Just add a little bit of brown over that pink shade, and then it will fit in a little bit more with the more fallish vibes. I like that more now. All right, for this banner, I think I want it to have, I kind of want it to be that green color up there, which was a mixture of green and brown. All right, and I'm just going to start painting this right over the top. And I do want to have a little bit of shading on this banner. So I'm going to grab even a little more brown and just mix that into that green shade. And then I can put that darker color back in those areas. And I'm going to paint in his nose. I'll have to add a highlight with a white gel pen. And I think I'll actually come in here with a black mark, a very thin black mark, and finish off his mouth so it's a little bit more visible. All right, I've watered down the gray in the palette, and I'm just going to add a little bit of gray around these elements to give them a little bit of shadow, just to give them a little bit of a finished look since they're looking just a little bit unfinished at the moment. Taking a Copic multiliner, and I'm just drawing in his mouth since it kind of got lost while I was painting. And I'm also going to take a white gel pen, and I'm going to put just a little bit of a highlight right on his nose. I'm using the Waffle Flower A2 layer dies so that I can trim this out to the perfect size for my card front. I'll just use a little bit of washi tape to hold this in place while I run it through my die cutting machine. The card base I'm using today is made out of some Nina Environmental Desert Storm cardstock, and I'm going to do a little bit of stamping and painting on top for a background pattern before I adhere my little watercolor piece. The stamp set has some great birch trees, so I thought that would look really cool on the background of the card. I'm using the same Acorn ink. Actually, instead of painting, I'm going to use colored pencils. I think that'll look a little bit better on this background. And I'm only going to worry about what I need to color for, until it's covered. So I know I'm just making a mark here that everything above this needs to be colored in. I'm going to do a brown background in between all of the tree trunks. And then I'm going to add a little bit of white onto the actual tree trunks themselves. For the white areas on the trees, I'm going to add white along one half of the tree so that it looks like a highlight. All right, so now I have that background colored enough that I can adhere my watercolor piece on top. All right, to finish off this card, I'm going to take a clear Wink of Stella glitter brush pen and just add some glitter to, or some shimmer to some areas on the card. And that is the card for today. Hope you guys enjoyed this fun way to use the Woodland Whimsy stamp set from SimonsStamp.com. You can get the stamp set apart from the card kit if you would like, or you can pick up the entire card kit and get tons of supplies, including the watercolor set, the masking paper, cardstock, some watercolor cards from Susie, and all sorts of supplies. You can get all of those together in one kit. I hope you enjoyed today's video. On screen, I've got 3 more card videos for you to check out. These are all watercolor cards with animals, so I hope you'll check those out. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. That lets me know you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in another video very soon.